Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. I'm about to need trains in my 1.0 playthrough, so this is a good time to make an update to my train blueprint guide. I left out how to make one of the curves in my first video, and I'm sorry about that. To make up for it, I will show you how to make and build with blueprint curves for single, double, and triple tracks. Before we start, it's important to note this one thing about the blueprinters. Anything you build in a blueprinter Mark 1 will only be able to be edited in the Mark 1. So even though with the Mark 2 it's bigger, I can't actually load any of the smaller ones in there. So if I go to any of my old ones, these are all with the Mark 1, it won't let me. So just something to keep in mind. I don't think it's a big deal, but every once in a while you may have to place down a different blueprinter just to edit the ones that you have. That being said, let's get into it. I'm going to go through a couple different sizes, like a single track, a double track, and that's my new triple track design. So I'll show the 3 different sizes and the 2 different looks I've gone for. So let's start small with the single track. To make this, it's really simple. Just grab a 2-meter foundation, zoop it out, grab yourself a wall. If you're building it with the grid of the blueprinter, these can snap right there. If for some reason you need to, you can lock it in place and nudge it to wherever you need to, and then just zoop those across. And there you go, really easy. So let me show you the newer style that I've come up with, which is similar. But instead of using a 2-meter, I'm using a full 4-meter foundation. Instead of walls, I'm using the metal beams. Not the painted beams. I like the way these look. They kind of look like girders. So we're going to spin this 6 clicks. Will get you a 90-degree turn. And I'm going to do that on both sides. I go up 2 meters, spin it around, and then from here I just drag it out to the length of the full blueprint. I grab some beam connectors, place one on top. Then I'm also going to place one on the bottom here, because I'm going to run a second one, so I think that just looks a little bit better. A little bit more work to do this, but that's what blueprints are for. Here is the dual track that I used in my last playthrough. To build this dual track, and the reason it had this little gap is I had another blueprint that I would plop on top and I could run a power tower on top. But in case you wanted to just make this a triple lane, you could definitely do that instead. Just make this middle one another 2-meter, or you could have them kind of offset like that. That might look cool. And then we just grab the wall, just lock it in place, nudge it to 4 meters, and then you can zoom it across. And with any of these, I would highly recommend also creating a second blueprint that only has one foundation. Every once in a while, you just need to move it out one, and it's much easier just to be able to place this one than place the big one and delete 3 tiles. So definitely make both blueprints. It can save you a lot of time. And here's the new style that I'm going with. So as you can see, it's really simple to make. You just use the 4-meter foundations, and then I did the exact same trick with the metal beams to kind of get that railing on the side. So the only thing with this is if I wanted to make a single foundation of this track, it's a little bit different. And it's only because of the beams. So what I would do is just grab one of the corners, go up 2, and then just run a floating beam there. So it obviously looks kind of silly being in the blueprint when it's just floating like that. But once you connect it with any of the other blueprints, they all merge together and give you that look that you're going for. So there you go. With getting the straight parts out of the way, let's get into the fun stuff. So let me show you how to do these curves. So this is going to be the tightest curve, and I would really only recommend doing this tight of a curve for a single track. If you try to add more to this curve, if I do this, you're going to notice that there's a lot of overlap with these. And if you try to do it even more, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse for the overlap. So a double track, maybe you could do it that tight, but a triple track, this is just not going to be great. I will have 2 channels linked in the description because both played a big role in coming up with how I do this. So shout out to DC1 who showed me how to do this method right here. If you ever want really fine turns, if you want to get rid of where it says foundation, just press T. You can hide that HUD. So if I hold control, I can free place another foundation on top, right? I'm going to get it right in the corner, and then I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel up 1. That right there is a 5-degree turn. So in the past, this is how I did it. So you place that there, and then from under here, you lock it into this corner, and you rotate it back. And if you delete this, you've got a really nice seam right there. It's beautiful. And it'll even work with a tighter turn too. So the 5-degree turn is what I use for these ones right here. This one is a 10-degree turn. So to do that, we would do the same thing. And we go 2 notches. And then you can click it, and then you do the same thing underneath. You go back to 2. And when you delete it, it's a really nice clean seam right there. And that would be a 10-degree turn. But in watching TotalXclipse, I found a slightly easier way to do pretty much the same thing. So I'll go right to the corner just like before. We're going to go the 2 notches because we're going to duplicate this first curve. And I'm going to go ahead and place this one. So this is where it's a little bit different. I think he would nudge this very first one in place and then place the second one. I find it much easier to place this first one on top, and then it's easier to find the underneath part right here. So then we lock it in place with H, and then you're going to go 4 meters to the right and 4 meters up. Go ahead and place it, and then you can delete it, and it's the exact same thing. Same merging of the foundations, just a little bit easier of a way to do it in my opinion. So shout out to DC and Total. And if you wanted to do this with the walls and you were doing this with a 2-meter foundation instead of the full 4, you're just going to place 3 of the 1-meter walls, delete the bottom 2, and then switch to the 4-meter. And that's how I did that whole style, basically. But if you wanted to do the kind of guard railing like I did here, this is how I do it. The outside is much easier. I'm just going to, it'll snap to either of the 2 foundations, so I like to just use the first one. That's usually the one connecting to a straight piece. So I go up by 2, and then I'm going to scroll 6 clicks. And then for the straight piece, I can just bring it back the 8. And actually, if I place the beam connectors, it's a little bit easier. So we can just do that. That side's nice and easy. This side, however, that part's easy. This, you can't drag it straight out because it's going to continue that straight line if you do. So what you want is to grab the end, you go up 2 meters, and then from there you can go back to the beam connector and then just delete that part. The inside part, however, is a little bit different. So I usually still work with the straight piece, and then you can't really, that's obviously not the center. That's not quite the center. So if I hold control, I can nudge it that 1/2 meter, and that's pretty close. So I go there, I spin it around just like before, and then on the straight piece, it's nice and easy. Although you'll notice it gets right to the edge. So let's just go ahead and place our beam connectors now. And then we'll get that one. Really, you could go the 7 or the 8, I think. Really wouldn't matter. And then same thing here. We can go, actually, we'll just go up to 2. I do this with most of them, where I just bring it up from the side. So with the curve, they overlap a bit. And to not get the clipping like crazy, and this is part of the reason why I like the beams, is I could eliminate a lot more of the clipping than when I use the walls. The walls are a set width, so once you curve it too much, they're just going to clip inside of each other and you just don't have enough space to really make it work. With the beams, you have a little bit more flexibility in my opinion. So with these, what I found is if I bring in this end one by 1/2 meter and then bring it in, and then I'll clip to that, go up to 2, and then bring that in. That right there will eliminate a lot of the little excess clipping, and they merge together really well. So this right here is this section right here, which I named single R-turn start. But the trick is you need a second piece, and this is the continued part. So let me show you how you make that. what you do is you delete all of the railing. You're gonna have to replace it. That's what blueprints are for. Just gotta do this once. And then we're gonna delete this first piece. And what we're gonna do is we are going to continue that curve. So we scroll at the 2, lock it underneath, 4 to the right, 4 up, and then go ahead and place it, and then we delete it. And the reason this works is because the blueprint designer saves it in this orientation no matter what. So even though we've turned and this is exactly the same thing as that first piece, but it's just rotated 10 degrees, it's gonna make all of this work. So then we just do the same thing. We go up the 2, scroll it around. Now with these, you definitely want to just go up from 2 meters on both of them, in my opinion. So on the outside, you just go to the edges, and it's nice and easy, but don't forget these because that makes it a whole lot easier. And then on the inside, I do the same thing. I usually find the closest part on this first section, and then I'll nudge it half a meter in. And then we just need to rotate it, go and lock it in place, and then you want to do the same thing. But with this one, because now this is going to be in the middle of the section, the reason I didn't bring this part in is this is usually connecting to a straight piece, so I want that to come to the very edge of the blueprint. With these though, I want both ends to actually be brought in by that half meter. So I lock it in place, do the half meter nudge, place my beam connectors before I forget. And same thing on this one, just a half a meter. And there you go. And so this is going to be the bulk of the curve. So let me show you how they fit together. So we've got the start, and we can just place that right on the edge. So we've got it lined up. And then we switch to the continued piece, and you'll notice it's not going to snap together. And if you hit R, it's definitely not going to work in blueprint mode. So we want to leave it in default. So I've noticed that you're looking for this spot right here, which is basically 2 meters in. It'll be halfway between the halfway and the edge. So if you look right here, you nudge it in place, then you're going to go 2 meters back, and then go ahead and place it. Obviously, you may need to move it a little bit around, but that's generally, if you get it right in the right spot, that's all it is. So you will have this where it's not quite combined. So if this does bother you, you could always just come around with beam connectors. I'd probably make sure they connect to the same one so they don't look weird like that. And you could hide that little break in the beams right there if you wanted to. And then on the inside, you'll notice they just barely overlap and clip. So same thing, if that bothered you, you could come back around and just hide this stuff with beam connectors. I personally think that it's just so little that I'm pretty much never going to notice. And because I need to place, hundreds of these things, it looks good enough to me. And then you can really easily just continue the curve by locking in place. You just place the next one, and then the next one. And there we go. And now we are facing east. So this is on the world grid. So if you didn't know, the world grid is oriented in the 4 cardinal directions. So we're facing north here. So to get to a 90-degree turn, you're going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 blueprints, and you'll have a 90-degree turn. Because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Each one of those is a 10-degree turn. So real quickly before we move on to the other pieces, let me show you what the difference is between all of these. This right here is only using this start piece. So if you place the start piece, and then you can actually just snap it really easily to the next one, and then the next one. And basically what you're doing is you're doing a 10-degree turn, and then nothing, and then a 10-degree turn, and then nothing. So a much smoother way would be to do it as a 5-degree turn on every single one. Instead of doing it 2 clicks, these 2 right here are only 1 click. So to make either one of those, it's the exact same thing, but instead when I rotate the foundation, instead of going twice, I just go once. And then I do everything exactly the same. Nudge it over, I'm gonna nudge it up. Add my walls or whatever railing, and I have the exact same method, and I can place these. And so that's the big difference. This would be a 10-degree turn on every single one. This is a 10-degree turn on every other one, which actually gives you the same curve as doing 5 degrees on every one, but this to me looks much more smooth. And then if for whatever reason you wanted to do just the 5-degree turn on every other one, you could get a really, really shallow curve, which doesn't look too bad, but I would still probably stick to the much more smooth curves like the 5 or the 10-degree one. But it does give you those options. With the bigger tracks, I only use the 5-degree turn. So let me show you how to make that. Oh, but this is slightly too close to the edge. So I actually need 1 more meter. So we'll just go 2. So that should be fine. Place the 4 and then the 2. Okay, so we go to the corner, we go 1 click, place that underneath, lock it in place, underneath. There we go, lock it in place. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we just need to make sure that we snap these, that now the 4 meter wants to snap to the top of it, so we just need to place the second one real quickly. Then we can snap the 4, get rid of that one, and now this 2 meter will snap to the bottom of the 4. And we have that turn. So the way I did a lot of my turns was only using that one piece. So it did the 5-degree turn, and then a flat piece, and then a 5-degree, and then the flat piece. So that is why a lot of my turns were like really, really gentle. I hadn't figured out the nudging it into the continued turn. So that is just a really cool trick that just gives you so many more options. But on a really wide track, the placing these is one, really easy to do, and it actually doesn't look too bad in my opinion. So with these, it's really easy. You just snap it on to the last one. And so you're only doing the curve every 2 foundations. But if you did want to make that continuation, you would just do the same thing I did before. You would delete the very first one, and then you would do it all over again, continuing from this curve. And you just add the second piece. And you could do the same thing as those. Alright, and probably no surprise, this is done the exact same way. So to do this, you need to give yourself just a little bit more room on the outside, because that's where you're doing the curve. So same thing as before. We'll do 1 click, because anything more on this big of a track is just not going to look good, I don't think. Lock it in place. And this one, we can just zoop all the way down. So the main difference with this as opposed to the other ones is because I'm using 4 foundations, these do overlap a bit. So I would do the same thing I was doing before, where I would try to find the middle, but a lot of the times it's just not quite there. That's pretty close. So we'll go there, rotate it. And since this one has the flat piece basically, we're going to want this one to go all the way to the edge. So just go to the edge and bring it in. Place these real quick. And there we go. But on all of the inside edges of the curves, I'm going to lock it in place. Instead of doing the half meter, I'm actually going to do a full meter. So we bring that in. And with the outside piece, all of them will still go to the edge, because they should all line up real nicely. And there's the starter piece. So let me just show you how these fit together real quickly. So I'm going to line these up with the foundations just to make my life easier. So we've got the start, and then if we switch to the continued piece, we'll just find where it looks like it's even, lock it in place. This one, I think, is 1, 2, 3 meters you need to nudge it back. let's just give one more for the example. And there we go. So as you can see, there is still a little bit of an overlap, and you could come around and cover these if you wanted to. I don't think it's too bad. It doesn't do too much Z-fighting unless you're up real close. But bringing in this piece by that meter really cuts down on a lot of the clipping. If you have them longer, they'll definitely stick out a bit more on each side. But it's really flexible, so if you didn't want to do this and you'd rather use painted beams or, you know, add some more lights or anything, the world is your oyster. Okay, so real quickly, I almost forgot, but I do want to show off how to lay the tracks inside of these. It's pretty easy, but not necessarily the most intuitive. With any type of curve and trains, my best suggestion is to create a straight section of the track to build off of. Now normally I would build it right here, but I have found that with these turns, it's actually easiest if I create the straight section to end at the middle of the last straight piece of the foundation. Hope that made sense. So you want to go to the middle of this very first one, and then from here, every 2 foundations, it'll line up directly with the middle of the foundation. So if I go 2, and then 2, and then 2, and they just keep lining up perfectly, so you know it's following the curve. And there you go. Now with this one, where it's just the starter piece, every single one, so you're only doing a curve every 2 foundations, with this style, you do want to just go to the edge of this foundation. So this one went to the half point, this one went to the very start of that foundation. And then from here, we're going to do the same thing. Every 2 foundations, it's going to line up with a seam of one of the 2 foundations. So we just keep going all the way across, and it'll just keep lining up. So it depends on which type of curve you're using. So with most of mine, I really do prefer the curve on each foundation. So with those, you just want to go to the half. And then, well, this one is the half. I forgot I brought those out a little bit first so they didn't all clip into each other. And then we're just going to go 2 foundations, 2 foundations, and it'll just keep lining up. So really easy to do. And same thing, we want a straight piece to work off of. Now with this one, since this is doing it the way I did in my previous playthrough, we're doing the curve, the flat, the curve, the flat. So we want to go to the edge of this last flat piece, and then it'll go every 2, just like the other ones. It doesn't matter if it's the inside or the outside part of the curve, it'll be the exact same. It's just even more subtle on the outside. And no surprise, this one works the same way. Now the way I designed this one is to work on the seam of the foundations. So with this one, we would come here. Now with this one, because the inside is quite a bit shorter, sometimes, yeah, it's not going to let me go here. So with these ones, I'd actually just go 3, and it's still going to work. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, and it's still right on the edge. The other sides are a little bit more forgiving, where you can keep up the same thing. So the halfway point, and then this will do every 2. Now this is obviously wide enough you could do 4 tracks if you wanted to. The spacing will just be a little bit different, whether it's the far inside or the far outside. All of these curves should be pretty easy to place the tracks on. And that pretty much covers all the curves, so hopefully that will give you the knowledge you need to create any of the curves you want for roads, railroads, whatever. And so if you're curious why in the world I would make a triple railroad blueprint, so my railroads are going to look something like this, where I'm going to do 3 sections of just this straight track, and then I'm going to mix in a support part. And then I can add support underneath. So I came up with this blueprint where it's just using some half foundations, some small concrete pillars to make the cool pattern, and then just using a square 2-meter sign and with some beams on the outside. This part is tricky because if I bring this beam all the way up in the blueprint, it makes the blueprint too tall and then it doesn't snap here. And so I need to, that's how I wanted them to go, but I haven't quite figured out a good way to blueprint that part yet. So still need some editing. But the idea is that's where I'll add the supports, and the reason why it's so flat on top, where I'm just using some frame walls and the small billboards to give it some lighting, it's because I want this to be stackable. So in my last playthrough, I ran into a whole bunch of traffic issues, and this is my solution. I am just going to add way more trains. I mean, what could go wrong, right? Okay, the reason why I won't have traffic issues is I'm not going to use a single signal in my world. I probably won't even unlock it. That's going to do it for this video. Hopefully I was able to answer a few more of the questions about how to make the different curves and whatnot. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. Also, if you have any suggestions for future videos, if you'd like me to cover anything else with trains or other blueprints, just let me know. I left out ramps because I didn't really change the way I built or placed them, so there are still some relevant pieces in my first train blueprint videos, and that playlist is linked in the description. I've got a couple more blueprint videos planned, so look forward to that, and thanks for watching.